They threw her into the blizzard to die. No coat, no shoes, no mercy. The pack she'd served her entire life watched as their alpha stripped everything from her: warmth, dignity, hope, and shoved her into a storm that had already killed 3 strong wolves that week. Lyra Hale, the girl who couldn't shift, stumbled into the white darkness knowing she had hours, maybe less. But in a cave carved from frozen stone, she found something impossible. A dying wolf twice the size of any she'd ever seen, bleeding black blood onto ancient ice. And the choice she made in that moment, to save the beast instead of herself, would shatter the fate of every wolf in the north. If you want to see how a girl cast out as worthless becomes the most feared queen in wolf history, stay until the very end. Drop a like, comment which city you're watching from, and let's begin. The wind screamed through Iron Pine Valley like a wounded animal, tearing at the trees and hurling snow in blinding sheets across the mountain face. Lyra Hale stood in the center of the pack circle, her thin dress already soaked through, her bare feet numb against the frozen ground. Around her, 70 wolves formed a wall of bodies, some in human form, others already shifted, their eyes glowing amber in the twilight. Not one of them looked away. This was a spectacle. This was justice, or so they called it. Alpha Garrick Ironpine circled her slowly, his massive frame casting a shadow that swallowed her whole. He was a mountain of a man, 6'5" and scarred from 100 battles, his graying hair pulled back tight against his skull. His wolf was just beneath the surface, rippling under his skin, waiting. He'd been waiting for this moment for months. "Lyra Hale," he said, his voice cutting through the wind like a blade. "Daughter of Thomas Hale, granddaughter of the Iron Pine bloodline, 22 years old, and still—" He stopped in front of her, tilting his head. "Human." The word landed like a slap. A few wolves laughed, others shook their heads in disgust. Lyra kept her chin up, her jaw locked tight. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not yet. Garrick leaned in close, his breath hot against her frozen skin. "You've had more chances than anyone in the history of this pack. Full moons, rituals, blood ceremonies. We even brought in a shaman from the Eastern Highlands." He straightened, addressing the circle now. "And what did we get? Nothing. She is broken. Useless. A stain on the Iron Pine name." "She's a curse!" someone shouted from the crowd. "Exile her!" "Let the mountain take her!" Lyra's hands trembled, but she forced herself to speak. Her voice came out steady, stronger than she felt. "I've served this pack every day of my life. I've hunted. I've healed. I've fought beside you. You've survived beside us." Garrick cut her off. "There's a difference. You're a liability, Lyra. A weak link. And in a pack like ours, weak links don't just break. They get everyone killed." He gestured to a young woman standing at the edge of the circle. Her name was Kira, and her arm was wrapped in bloodied bandages. "3 nights ago, we were ambushed by rogues from the Blackridge clan. Kira here took a hit meant for you because you couldn't shift fast enough to defend yourself. She'll carry that scar for the rest of her life." Kira looked away, shame flickering across her face. Lyra's heart sank. She'd tried to thank Kira, tried to apologize, but the younger wolf had refused to speak to her since. "You're a danger to your own people," Garrick continued, "and I won't let you cost us any more blood." He reached for her cloak, the only thing keeping the wind off her shoulders, and ripped it away. The cold hit her like a fist. Lyra gasped, stumbling backward, but Garrick wasn't done. He grabbed her boots next, yanking them off her feet one by one and tossing them into the snow. "No!" Lyra's voice cracked. "Please!" "You want mercy?" Garrick's eyes blazed. "Then pray the mountain shows you some, because we won't." He shoved her hard, and she fell to her knees in the snow. The cold bit into her skin like teeth. She looked up at the faces around her, wolves she'd grown up with. Wolves she'd laughed with, bled with. Not one of them moved to help her. Her cousin Mira stood near the front, her arms crossed, her expression carved from stone. Lyra's gaze found hers, pleading silently. "Please, don't let him do this." Mira looked away. Garrick raised his hand and the circle parted, opening a path toward the northern ridge, the deadliest stretch of the mountain where the wind funneled through narrow passes and the temperatures dropped low enough to freeze blood in minutes. "Go," Garrick said. "If you survive the night, you're free. If you don't—" He smiled, cold and empty. Then the mountain made the choice for us. Lyra pushed herself to her feet, her legs shaking. She wanted to scream at them, wanted to fight. But what was the point? She had no wolf, no claws, no strength beyond what her human body could give her. So she turned toward the darkness and started walking. The snow was deeper than she expected, rising past her ankles, then her shins. Each step felt like dragging herself through broken glass. The wind tore at her dress, shredding the thin fabric and leaving her skin raw and exposed. Behind her, she heard the pack shifting, bones cracking, fur rippling into place. And then the howls began. A chorus of voices rising into the storm, celebrating her exile. Lyra didn't look back. The first hour was the worst. Her body fought the cold with everything it had, shivering violently, her heart racing, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. But the mountain was relentless. The wind drove the snow sideways, blinding her, and the temperature continued to drop. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold in whatever warmth she had left. But it was like trying to hold water in her hands. Her feet went numb first, then her fingers, then her legs. She stumbled over a hidden root and fell hard, her palms scraping against ice-covered stone. For a long moment, she just lay there, her cheek pressed against the frozen ground, her vision swimming. "Get up," she told herself. "Get up or die." But her body didn't want to listen. It was so much easier to just stay down, to close her eyes, to let the cold take her. No. The word came from somewhere deep inside her, a place she didn't know existed. She pushed herself up onto her hands and knees, then to her feet. Her legs shook so badly she could barely stand, but she forced herself forward. One step, then another. She didn't know how long she walked. Time lost all meaning in the whiteout. But eventually, through the swirling snow, she saw it, a dark shape jutting out from the mountainside. A cave. Lyra half ran, half collapsed toward the opening, dragging herself inside just as her legs gave out completely. The wind cut off instantly, the silence so sudden it was almost deafening. She lay on the cold stone floor, gasping, her body shaking so hard her teeth rattled. For a few minutes, she just focused on breathing, on staying conscious. Then she heard it, a low, ragged sound, wet and labored, breathing. Lyra froze. Slowly, she lifted her head and looked deeper into the cave. At first, she thought it was a shadow, but as her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she realized what she was looking at. A wolf. Not just any wolf. The biggest wolf she'd ever seen, easily the size of a horse, with fur so black it seemed to swallow the light. It lay on its side, its massive chest rising and falling in slow, painful rhythms, and beneath it, spreading across the stone, was a pool of blood. Lyra's breath caught. She should run. She should get as far away from this creature as possible. Injured animals were dangerous, unpredictable, but she didn't move. Instead, she crawled closer. The wolf's eyes cracked open, molten gold burning with fever and pain. It watched her approach, its lips pulling back to reveal teeth the size of daggers. Lyra stopped a few feet away, her heart hammering. "Easy," she whispered. "I'm not going to hurt you." The wolf's growl deepened, a sound that vibrated through the stone beneath her. She held up her hands, showing she was unarmed. I know you don't trust me, but I think—" She swallowed hard. "I think we're both going to die if we don't help each other." The wolf stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, its head lowered back to the ground, too exhausted to fight. Lyra moved closer, her hand shaking as she examined the wound. It was deep, a gash running along the wolf's ribs, the edges blackened and festering. Silver. Someone had used a silver blade. She'd seen wounds like this before. Silver poisoning spread fast in wolves, shutting down their healing abilities and burning through their systems like acid. If she didn't do something, this wolf would be dead by morning, and if this wolf died, she'd freeze to death long before dawn. Lyra looked around the cave, her mind racing. She had no supplies, no medicine, no tools, just her dress, her bare hands, and whatever she could find in this frozen hell. Think, She crawled to the cave entrance and scooped up handfuls of clean snow, packing it against the wound to slow the bleeding. The wolf flinched, but didn't pull away. Next, she tore strips from the hem of her dress, using them to bind the snow in place. It wasn't much, but it was something. But the infection, that was the real problem. Silver poisoning needed an antiseptic, something to draw out the toxins. Her eyes landed on a cluster of pine trees just outside the cave, their branches heavy with frozen resin. Lyra forced herself to stand, her legs barely holding her weight, and stumbled back out into the storm. The wind hit her like a wall, but she pushed through it, reaching for the nearest branch. Her fingers were so numb she could barely feel the bark, but she managed to scrape off a handful of sticky resin. By the time she made it back to the cave, her vision was blurring, her body on the edge of collapse. But she didn't stop. She heated the resin in her hands, rubbing it until it softened, then smeared it over the wound, working it into the blackened edges. The wolf let out a low, pained growl, but it held still. Lyra wrapped the wound again, tighter this time, then collapsed beside the massive creature, her chest heaving. For a long time, neither of them moved. Then slowly the wolf shifted, just slightly, pressing its warm body against hers. Lyra's eyes widened. The heat radiating from the creature was incredible, cutting through the cold like a fire. She leaned into it without thinking, her frozen limbs soaking up the warmth, and for the first time in hours, the shivering began to ease. She didn't know why the wolf was letting her do this. Didn't know if it was gratitude or exhaustion or something else entirely. But as her eyes grew heavy and the storm howled outside, Lyra realized something. She wasn't alone anymore. She woke to the sound of voices. Lyra's eyes snapped open, her heart lurching. Sunlight streamed through the cave entrance, pale and cold, but bright enough to hurt. She sat up slowly, her body stiff and aching, and looked down. The wolf was still there, its breathing steadier now, the wound no longer bleeding. It was alive. But the voices outside were getting closer. Tracks lead this way. She can't have gone far, not in that storm. The pack. Lyra's stomach dropped. They'd come to make sure she was dead, and if they found her alive, found her with this wolf, they'd finish the job themselves. She looked at the massive creature beside her. It was still too weak to fight, too weak to run. If they found it, they'd kill it. And suddenly, Lyra knew what she had to do. She pushed herself to her feet, her legs trembling, and moved toward the cave entrance. The voices were just beyond the ridge now, maybe 30 seconds away. Lyra stepped out into the snow and deliberately snapped a branch underfoot. The voices stopped. "There!" someone shouted. Lyra didn't wait. She turned and ran, her bare feet screaming in protest, leading the hunters away from the cave, away from the wolf. Behind her, she heard them shift, bones cracking, paws hitting snow. They were coming. She ran harder, her lungs burning, her vision blurring. She didn't know where she was going, didn't have a plan beyond lead them away. But then she heard it, a sound that stopped her cold. A roar. Not a howl. A roar. Lyra spun around just in time to see the black wolf explode from the cave, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. It hit the lead hunter, a gray wolf named Wren, with the force of an avalanche, its jaws closing around his throat. Wren didn't even have time to scream. The other hunters skidded to a stop, their eyes wide, their hackles raised. But the black wolf didn't stop. It lunged again, blood dripping from its muzzle, a sound coming from its chest that was more demon than animal. One of the hunters, a young wolf named Cole, tried to run. The black wolf caught him in 2 strides. The remaining hunters scattered, disappearing into the trees, their howls of terror echoing through the valley. And then there was silence. Lyra stood frozen, her breath coming in ragged gasps, staring at the massive black wolf. It turned toward her slowly, its golden eyes locking onto hers. Blood dripped from its fur. Its sides heaved with effort. The wound on its ribs had reopened, fresh blood seeping through the makeshift bandage. It took a step toward her, then another, and then it collapsed. Lyra ran to it without thinking, dropping to her knees beside the massive creature. "No, no, don't you dare!" The wolf's eyes were already closing, its breathing shallow. She pressed her hands against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding, but there was so much blood. Too much. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please don't die. Not after—" The wolf's eyes opened one last time, meeting hers. And in that moment, Lyra saw something she didn't expect. Recognition. Then the world went black. When Lyra opened her eyes, she was still in the cave, but the light had changed. Dawn had broken fully now, pale and gray, casting long shadows across the stone floor. Her body ached everywhere, her muscles screaming from exhaustion, her skin raw from the cold. But she was alive. And so was the wolf. It lay beside her, its massive chest rising and falling in steady rhythms. The bleeding had stopped. Somehow, impossibly, the wound looked better than it had hours ago. The blackened edges had faded to an angry red, and the flesh around it was beginning to knit itself back together. Lyra sat up slowly, wincing at the stiffness in her joints. Her hands were caked with dried blood, some hers, most of it the wolf's. She looked down at the creature, studying it in the daylight for the first time. Even unconscious, it was terrifying. The sheer size of it defied everything she knew about wolves. Its paws were bigger than her head, its claws like curved daggers. The fur was midnight black, so dark it seemed to absorb the light, and beneath it she could see the outline of powerful muscles built for killing. But it had saved her. Lyra reached out carefully, her fingers trembling, and touched the wolf's shoulder. The fur was coarse but warm, radiating heat like a forge. She half expected the creature to wake and snap at her, but it didn't move. "Who are you?" she whispered. The wolf's ear twitched, but its eyes remained closed. Lyra pulled her hand back and looked toward the cave entrance. The bodies were still out there, Wren and Cole, torn apart in seconds. The other hunters had fled, but they wouldn't stay gone. They'd go back to the pack. They'd tell Garrick what they saw, and Garrick would come with everyone. She had to move. Had to get this wolf somewhere safer before... A low growl cut through her thoughts. Lyra froze, her eyes snapping back to the wolf. Its golden gaze was open now, fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. There was no fever in those eyes anymore. No pain, just pure predatory focus. "Easy," Lyra said softly, holding perfectly still. "I'm not going to hurt you. I helped you, remember?" The wolf's growl deepened, and it shifted, trying to push itself up onto its legs. The movement made the wound reopen slightly, fresh blood seeping through the bandage. "Stop! You're going to make it worse!" The wolf lunged. Lyra threw herself backward, her shoulders hitting the cave wall hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. The wolf loomed over her, its jaws inches from her face, its breath hot and sharp. "Please!" Her voice came out as a whisper. "I saved your life." The wolf's lips curled back, revealing teeth that could tear her apart without effort. But it didn't bite. Instead, it leaned closer, its nose almost touching her throat, and inhaled deeply. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew what it was doing. Wolves could smell fear, could sense lies. It was deciding whether she was a threat. She forced herself to meet its gaze. "I don't know who you are or why someone tried to kill you with silver, but I don't care. You saved me from the hunters. I saved you from dying. That makes us even." The wolf stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly it pulled back and limped to the far side of the cave, collapsing onto its side with a huff of pain. Lyra let out a shaky breath and slid down the wall, her legs too weak to hold her up. They stayed like that for several minutes, her against one wall, the wolf against the other, both too exhausted to do anything but breathe. Finally, Lyra spoke. "The hunters will come back, probably with the whole pack. If we stay here, we're both dead." The wolf's ear flicked toward her, listening. "There's a ridge about 2 miles east," she continued, thinking out loud. "It's steep, but there are caves higher up, places the pack doesn't patrol because the terrain's too dangerous. If we can make it there before nightfall..." The wolf let out a low rumble that might have been agreement or warning. Lyra couldn't tell. She pushed herself to her feet, her body protesting every movement. "Can you walk?" The wolf didn't answer, but it stood, slowly, favoring its injured side. Blood dripped from the wound onto the stone floor. Lyra tore another strip from her already shredded dress and moved toward the creature. The wolf's eyes tracked her every step, but it didn't growl this time. She knelt beside it, her hands shaking, and pressed the fabric against the wound. "Hold still," she muttered. "This is going to hurt." The wolf's muscles tensed beneath her hands, but it didn't move. She worked quickly, wrapping the makeshift bandage around its massive torso and tying it as tight as she could. When she finished, the wolf turned its head and looked at her, really looked at her, and for a second Lyra could have sworn she saw something almost human in those golden eyes. "Come on," she said, stepping toward the entrance. "We need to go." They moved slowly, Lyra leading the way and the wolf limping behind her. The snow outside was pristine now, the storm having erased all traces of the night before except for the two bodies lying twisted and broken near the tree line. Lyra forced herself not to look at them. The climb was brutal. The ridge she'd mentioned was steeper than she remembered, the path covered in ice that made every step treacherous. Her feet were so numb she could barely feel the ground beneath them, and more than once she slipped, catching herself at the last second before tumbling down the slope. Behind her, the wolf struggled too. Its breathing grew labored, its steps uneven. But it didn't stop. They were halfway up when Lyra heard the howls. She froze, her blood turning to ice. The sound came from the valley below, dozens of voices rising in unison, calling to each other. The pack was on the move. "Faster!" Lyra hissed, pushing herself harder. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she didn't slow down. The wolf kept pace beside her now, its golden eyes scanning the trees below. The howls grew closer. Lyra spotted a narrow crevice in the rock face ahead, barely wide enough for her to squeeze through, let alone a wolf the size of a horse. But it was their only option. "In here!" she gasped, diving into the gap. The wolf hesitated, its massive frame too big for the opening. "You have to try!" Lyra reached out and grabbed its fur, pulling with all her strength. The wolf growled but pushed forward, its shoulders scraping against the stone as it forced its way through. They tumbled into a small hollow just as the first wolves crested the ridge below. Lyra pressed herself against the back wall, her hand clamped over her mouth to muffle her breathing. The black wolf crouched beside her, its body coiled tight, ready to spring. Through the narrow gap, she could see them. At least 20 wolves in shifted form, their noses to the ground, tracking. Garrick was with them, still in human form, his face carved from stone. "Spread out!" he barked. "She can't have gone far. And if that rogue wolf is with her, I want it alive. There's a bounty on black wolves from the Northern Territories, 5,000 silver if we bring it in breathing." Lyra's eyes widened. 5,000 silver? What kind of wolf was worth that much? The pack fanned out, their movements coordinated and efficient. One wolf passed within 10 feet of their hiding spot, its nose twitching. Lyra held her breath, her heart pounding so loud she was sure it could hear. The wolf paused, sniffed the air, took a step closer. The black wolf beside Lyra tensed, a growl building deep in its chest. "No," Lyra thought desperately. "Don't! Please, don't!" The scout wolf's ears pricked forward. It had heard something, and then, from somewhere higher up the ridge, a rock slide started. Loose stones tumbling down the slope with a deafening clatter. The scout's head snapped toward the sound, and it bolted in that direction, barking to alert the others. Within seconds, the entire pack was moving away from them, chasing the distraction. Lyra sagged against the wall, her whole body shaking. The black wolf relaxed slightly, but its eyes never left the gap in the rock. They stayed hidden until the howls faded completely and the forest fell silent again. Only then did Lyra allow herself to breathe. "That was too close," she whispered. The wolf turned its head toward her, and she could have sworn it nodded. They waited another hour before moving, making sure the pack was truly gone. When they finally emerged from the hollow, the sun was high overhead, and the temperature had risen just enough to make the snow wet and heavy. Lyra led them higher, toward the cave she'd mentioned. Her feet left bloody prints in the snow now, the skin torn and frozen, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Not until they were safe. The caves turned out to be more like a series of connected tunnels carved into the mountain by centuries of wind and water. Lyra chose one near the back, deep enough that the wind couldn't reach but open enough that they wouldn't be trapped. She collapsed onto the cold stone floor, her body finally giving out. The wolf limped in behind her and settled near the entrance, positioning itself between her and the outside world. "Guard." Lyra stared at it, something shifting in her chest. This creature, this massive, terrifying predator, was protecting her. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why did you save me? You don't even know me." The wolf's golden eyes met hers, and for a moment something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition of something deeper. Lyra pulled her knees to her chest, trying to conserve warmth. Her dress was barely holding together now, and the cold was starting to creep back in. She needed fire, needed food, needed a dozen things she didn't have. But she was alive, and that was more than anyone expected. She must have dozed off, because when she opened her eyes again, the light outside had changed. Dusk was falling, painting the snow in shades of purple and gray, and the wolf was watching her. Not with the predatory intensity from before, but with something softer, something almost concerned. Lyra sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in her ribs. "I need to check your wound," she said. "Make sure it's not infected." The wolf didn't move as she approached, didn't growl when she carefully peeled back the bandage. The wound looked better, much better than it should have. The edges were sealed now, the flesh pink and healthy instead of black and festering. "How is this possible?" Lyra breathed. "Silver wounds don't heal this fast. They don't heal at all without proper medicine." The wolf rumbled low in its chest, a sound that wasn't quite a growl. Lyra rewrapped the wound with fresh fabric torn from her dress, which was now barely more than scraps held together by determination, and sat back on her heels. "You're not a normal wolf, are you?" The creature's eyes gleamed in the fading light. "The pack said there's a bounty on you, 5,000 silver. That's more money than most wolves see in a lifetime." She tilted her head. "What did you do to earn that kind of price on your head?" The wolf turned away, facing the cave entrance. Lyra sighed. "Right. You can't exactly answer me, can you?" She moved to the back of the cave and started gathering what little dry material she could find. Bits of moss, a few sticks that had blown in during the storm. It wasn't much, but if she could get a fire going, she might survive another night. Her fingers were so numb she could barely hold the sticks. She tried striking them together the way her father had taught her years ago, but nothing happened. No spark, no heat. "Come on," she muttered through chattering teeth. "Come on!" A shadow fell over her. She looked up to find the black wolf standing directly behind her, its massive body blocking the wind from the entrance. "What are you—" The wolf lay down, curling its body around her like a living wall. The heat radiating from its fur was immediate and overwhelming. Lyra's eyes burned. She didn't know if it was from exhaustion or gratitude or the sheer impossibility of everything that had happened in the last 2 days. She leaned against the wolf's side, letting the warmth seep into her frozen bones. "Thank you," she whispered. The wolf's breathing slowed, steady and deep, and Lyra felt her own body begin to relax for the first time since the exile. She was just starting to drift off when she heard it. Voices. Again. But this time they weren't coming from below. They were coming from above. Lyra's eyes snapped open. The black wolf was already on its feet, its hackles raised, a growl building in its chest that made the stone beneath them vibrate. "Saw smoke from the valley. Someone's up here." Could be survivors from the avalanche last month. Or rogues. Either way, Alpha wants them found. Lyra's blood ran cold. They'd found them. Somehow the pack had tracked them here. She grabbed the wolf's fur, pulling it deeper into the cave. "We have to hide. If they find us—" But it was too late. A figure appeared at the cave entrance, silhouetted against the dying light. Lyra couldn't make out details, but she could see the shape of a wolf, human form, but ready to shift at any second. "Well, well," the figure said, and Lyra's stomach dropped. She knew that voice. Marcus, Garrick's second-in-command, the most loyal enforcer in the pack, and the cruelest. He stepped into the cave, and 2 more wolves followed him, both in shifted form, their eyes glowing amber in the shadows. Marcus smiled when he saw Lyra, the expression cold and sharp. "The pack's going to be so happy to know you're still breathing. Alpha Garrick was hoping you'd survive just long enough to suffer." Lyra pushed herself to her feet, her legs shaking. "I'm not going back." "Oh, sweetheart, you don't have a choice." Marcus's eyes shifted to the black wolf. "And you brought us a bonus. Do you have any idea what that thing is worth?" The black wolf's growl deepened, its body coiling like a spring. Marcus laughed. "Go ahead, beast, try it. My boys here are itching for a fight." The 2 shifted wolves separated, moving to flank the black wolf from both sides. They were fast, trained killers, both of them. But the black wolf was faster. It moved like lightning, hitting the wolf on the left with enough force to send it crashing into the cave wall. The second wolf lunged, jaws snapping, but the black wolf twisted mid-strike and caught it by the throat. Marcus shifted in an instant. A gray wolf nearly as large as his companions, and launched himself at the black wolf's exposed back. "No!" Lyra screamed, but the black wolf spun, impossibly fast for something so injured, and met Marcus head-on. The two massive creatures collided with a sound like thunder, teeth and claws flashing in the dim light. Lyra pressed herself against the cave wall, her heart in her throat. She was useless here. No claws, no fangs, no strength. Just a human girl watching monsters tear each other apart. The black wolf fought like a demon, but it was still injured, still weakened. Marcus and his wolves had the advantage of numbers, and they used it ruthlessly. They came at the black wolf from all sides, driving it back, wearing it down. Blood splattered across the stone floor, black and red mixing together. Lyra's mind raced. She had to do something, had to help. But what could she possibly? Her eyes landed on a loose stone near her feet, about the size of her fist. It wasn't much, but it was something. She grabbed the stone and hurled it with all her strength at the nearest wolf. It struck the creature square in the eye, and it yelped, stumbling backward. Marcus's head whipped toward her, his wolf eyes blazing with fury. And in that split second of distraction, the black wolf struck. It hit Marcus from the side, jaws locking around his shoulder, and drove him into the ground with bone-crushing force. Marcus thrashed, trying to break free, but the black wolf held on, its teeth sinking deeper. The other two wolves hesitated, suddenly unsure, and then, from outside the cave, came a sound that made everyone freeze. Howls, dozens of them, rising from every direction. The entire pack had arrived. Marcus shifted back to human form, blood pouring from the wound in his shoulder. He grinned through the pain. "You're surrounded, you stupid beast. There's nowhere left to run." The black wolf released him and moved to stand between Lyra and the cave entrance, its body trembling with exhaustion. Lyra's hands were shaking. This was it. There was no way out. Even if the black wolf was strong enough to fight, it couldn't take on an entire pack. They were going to die here. But then the black wolf did something Lyra didn't expect. It looked back at her just for a second, and in its golden eyes, she saw an apology. And then it tilted its head back and howled. The sound was nothing like a normal wolf's howl. It was deeper, more primal, carrying a resonance that made Lyra's bones vibrate and her teeth ache. The cave walls seemed to shudder with it, and from somewhere in the darkness beyond the ridge, something answered. Not a howl, a roar. The roar came again, closer this time, shaking loose snow from the trees and sending rocks tumbling down the mountainside. It wasn't the sound of any wolf Lyra had ever heard. It was something older, something that made her hindbrain scream at her to run, to hide, to make herself as small as possible. Marcus scrambled backward, his eyes wide, his hand pressed against the bleeding wound on his shoulder. What the hell was that? The black wolf stood perfectly still, its golden eyes fixed on the cave entrance, waiting. The howls outside had stopped. Every wolf in the pack had gone silent. Then the ground began to shake, not from an earthquake or an avalanche, but from footsteps. Heavy, rhythmic, getting closer with each second. Lyra could hear branches snapping, could hear the crunch of snow under immense weight. Marcus's wolves broke first. They bolted from the cave without waiting for orders, their tails tucked, their ears flat against their skulls. Marcus tried to call them back, but his voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "Stand your ground, you cowards! It's just—" A shadow fell across the cave entrance, and then they appeared. Wolves. But not like any Lyra had seen before. These were massive, nearly as large as the black wolf beside her, their fur ranging from silver to charcoal gray. They moved with military precision, forming a perfect semicircle around the cave entrance, blocking every escape route. And at the center of the formation stood a man. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a presence that seemed to fill the entire mountainside. His hair was black as midnight, pulled back from a face that could have been carved from granite. Scars crossed his jaw and neck, silver lines against bronze skin. He wore dark leather and fur, practical clothing built for the cold, but there was nothing humble about the way he carried himself. This was someone who expected to be obeyed. His eyes swept the cave, taking in Marcus, the two injured wolves, and finally landing on Lyra. They were the same molten gold as the black wolf's, and when they met hers, Lyra felt the air leave her lungs. Those eyes held recognition, authority, and something that might have been concern. Marcus found his voice.
"Who the hell are you? This is Iron Pine territory, and you're leaving." The man's voice was low and controlled, but it carried the weight of absolute command. "Right now, all of you." Marcus's face flushed red. "You don't give orders here. I'm second in command of the Iron Pine Pack, and by rights..." The man took a single step forward, and Marcus stopped talking. "By rights," the man said quietly, "I could execute every wolf on this mountain for attacking one of mine. The only reason you're still breathing is because I'm in a generous mood." He tilted his head slightly. "Don't test my patience." One of the gray wolves, a female with scars across her muzzle, growled low. "Alpha Darien, should we—" "No." Darien's gaze never left Marcus. "Let them go. They're not worth the effort." Alpha Darien. The name hit Lyra like a physical blow.
She'd heard stories about the Northern Territories, whispered tales of a ruler so powerful that even the wildest rogues bowed to him. The Wolf King, some called him. The Black Death. The Alpha, who'd unified a dozen warring packs under a single banner through a combination of strategic brilliance and sheer, terrifying strength. And he was standing 10 feet away from her. Marcus seemed to realize who he was dealing with because the color drained from his face. "Alpha Darien."
We didn't know."
"The Black Wolf. We thought it was a rogue." "The Black Wolf is mine," Darien said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "As is the girl. Touch either of them again, and I'll burn the Iron Pine Pack to ash." Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. Finally, he nodded and stumbled toward the cave entrance. The two injured wolves followed, limping badly. Darien watched them go, his expression carved from ice. "Tell your Alpha that if he wants to discuss boundaries, he can come to Blackthorn Hold himself. In the meantime, I suggest he teach his wolves the difference between hunting and suicide." Marcus didn't answer. He just shifted and ran, disappearing into the trees with his wolves close behind. The moment they were gone, Darien turned and dropped to one knee beside the black wolf. His hands moved over its body with practiced efficiency, checking the wound, feeling for broken bones. "You idiotic, stubborn..." His voice was softer now, edged with something that might have been fear. "I told you not to engage. I told you to wait for backup." The black wolf let out a low whine. "Don't give me that," Darien muttered. "You're lucky you didn't..." He stopped, his eyes landing on the makeshift bandage around the wolf's ribs. His fingers traced the torn fabric, clearly from a dress, and the dried resin that had been used as an antiseptic. Slowly, he turned to look at Lyra. She was still pressed against the cave wall, her heart hammering, her mind struggling to process what was happening. The most powerful alpha in the north was kneeling 5 feet away from her, and he was looking at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "You did this," he said. It wasn't a question. Lyra swallowed hard and nodded. Darien's gaze moved over her, taking in the shredded dress, the bloody feet, the bruises covering her arms. "You're human." "I'm Wolf," Lyra said, finding her voice. "I just can't shift." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Can't or haven't? Does it matter?" "Yes?" He stood and Lyra had to tilt her head back to keep eye contact. Because if you're suppressed, that's fixable. If you're human-born, that's a different problem entirely. "I'm Iron Pine bloodline," Lyra said, her chin lifting. "My father was Thomas Hale. My grandmother was Elena Hale," Darien finished. I knew your father." Lyra blinked. "You... what?" "Thomas and I served together in the Northern Campaign 15 years ago. He saved my life twice." Darien's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "He was a good man. When I heard he'd died, I sent condolences to the pack, but Garrick refused them." Lyra's throat tightened. Her father had died when she was 12, killed in a border skirmish with rogues. Or at least, that's what the pack had told her. She'd never been allowed to see the body. "Why would Garrick refuse condolences from you?" "Because your father died protecting me," Darien said quietly. "And Garrick blamed me for his death. He wasn't wrong to." The cave fell silent except for the wind outside and the labored breathing of the black wolf. Lyra looked between Darien and the creature on the floor. "The wolf? It's yours?" "He's not an it,"
Darian said. And yes, he's my brother. The world tilted.
Lyra stared at the black wolf, then back at Darian, her mind racing. Your brother is but you're human form right now? Yes. Darian knelt beside the wolf again, his hand resting on its massive head. Kieran here decided to scout the Iron Pine borders without telling anyone. He was ambushed by silver-armed hunters and barely made it to that cave before the poison took hold. The black wolf, Kieran, made a sound that might have been protest. Don't argue with me, Darian said. You know I'm right. Lyra's head was spinning. So when I found him, when I stopped the bleeding, you saved the life of the second most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories, Darian said, which, coincidentally, makes you either very brave or very stupid. I didn't know who he was. That's what makes it brave. Darian's golden eyes met hers. You had no reason to help him. He could have killed you, but you risked your life anyway. Lyra didn't know what to say to that. Darian stood and gestured to the scarred female wolf still standing guard at the entrance. Sarah, get the healers up here. I want Kieran stabilized before we move him. Sarah nodded and disappeared into the darkness. Darian turned back to Lyra. What's your name? Lyra. Lyra Hale. Well, Lyra Hale, you have a choice to make. He crossed his arms. You can go back to the Iron Pine Pack and pretend this never happened. I'll make sure Garrick doesn't retaliate for Kieran killing his wolves. They attacked first, and by law, that makes it self-defense. You'll be safe. Or? Lyra asked, because she could hear the unspoken alternative hanging in the air. Or you come with me, Darian said. To Blackthorn Hold. My healers can examine you, figure out why you can't shift. If it's a medical issue, we'll fix it. If it's something else, he paused. We'll deal with it. Lyra's pulse quickened. And if I choose to go back? Then you're a braver woman than I thought, Darian said, because from what I saw, that pack doesn't want you alive. Lyra looked down at her torn dress, her bleeding feet, her hands still caked with dried blood from trying to save a wolf she didn't know. He was right. Garrick had exiled her to die. The pack had hunted her. The only reason she was still breathing was because she'd refused to give up. Going back would mean walking into a cage. But going with Darian meant walking into the unknown. She met his gaze. If I come with you, I'm not a prisoner, and I'm not a debt to be repaid. Darian's lips twitched, almost a smile. Agreed. And if your healers can't help me, I'm free to leave. Also agreed. Lyra took a breath. Then I'll come. Something shifted in Darian's expression. Approval, maybe, or respect. Good. Because there's something else you should know. What? The reason Kieran was scouting your territory in the first place, Darian said, is because we've been tracking a conspiracy. Someone's been poisoning wolves across the Northern Territories, suppressing their abilities to shift. We've found traces of the compound in 3 different packs so far. Lyra's blood ran cold. You think Iron Pine is involved? I think someone in Iron Pine knows more than they're saying. Darian's eyes were sharp. And the fact that Thomas Hale's daughter can't shift despite coming from one of the strongest bloodlines in the region? That's not a coincidence. Before Lyra could respond, Sarah returned with 2 other wolves, both carrying leather packs filled with medical supplies. They moved to Kieran immediately, working with quiet efficiency to clean and dress his wounds properly. Darian watched them work for a moment, then turned back to Lyra. Can you walk? Lyra looked down at her feet. They were a mess, bloody, swollen, probably frostbitten, but she nodded. I'll manage. No, you won't. Before she could protest, Darian scooped her up effortlessly, one arm under her knees and the other supporting her back. Lyra gasped, her hands instinctively grabbing his shoulders. I can walk. Not on those feet, you can't. Darian's voice was matter of fact. Save your pride for later. Right now, I need to get you both back to the hold before Garrick decides to do something stupid. He carried her out of the cave and into the night. The temperature had dropped even further, but Darian's body radiated heat like a furnace, and Lyra found herself leaning into it despite herself. Behind them, 4 wolves carefully lifted Kieran onto a makeshift stretcher and began the descent down the mountain. The forest was filled with Darian's wolves, at least 30 of them, positioned at strategic points along the ridge. They moved like soldiers, coordinated and disciplined, nothing like the chaotic pack structure Lyra was used to. As they passed, Each wolf bowed their head to Darien. Some of them looked at Lyra with curiosity, others with suspicion, but none of them challenged Darien's decision to bring her. They walked for over an hour, moving deeper into the mountains than Lyra had ever been. The terrain grew rougher, the trees thicker, until finally they emerged into a clearing, and Lyra's breath caught. Blackthorn Hold wasn't a pack house. It was a fortress. Built into the side of the mountain itself, the structure was a combination of stone, timber, and iron. Watchtowers rose at each corner, manned by sentries. A massive gate stood at the entrance, reinforced with silver-etched runes that made Lyra's skin prickle just looking at them. Darien carried her through the gate and into a courtyard where dozens of wolves moved with purpose, training, talking, working. All of them stopped when they saw their alpha. "Status," Darien said to a gray-haired man who approached immediately. "Eastern border secure. No movement from the Ravenclaw pack. Western Patrol reported 3 rogues near the river, but they fled before engagement." "And the prisoner?" "Still won't talk, Alpha." Darien's jaw tightened. "I'll deal with him tomorrow. Right now, get the healers to the medical wing. Kieran's injured, and we have a guest who needs immediate attention." The man's gaze flicked to Lyra, his expression unreadable. "Of course, Alpha." Darien carried Lyra through a maze of corridors and into a large room lined with beds and medical equipment. It smelled like antiseptic and herbs, clean and organized. A woman in her 50s looked up from grinding something in a mortar. Her eyes widened when she saw Darien. "Kieran?" "Being brought in now," Darien said. "But first I need you to look at her." He set Lyra down carefully on one of the beds. The healer moved to Lyra immediately, her hands gentle but efficient as she examined the injuries. Frostbite on the feet, 2nd degree. Bruising along the ribs, likely from impact. Lacerations on the hands and arms, dehydration, exhaustion. She looked up at Darien. "How long was she out there?" 2 days, Lyra answered before Darien could. "Maybe 3. I lost track." The healer's eyebrows rose. "And you're still conscious? That's impressive." She began pulling supplies from a cabinet. "I'm going to clean these wounds and apply a salve. It's going to hurt." "I can handle it," Lyra said. She was right. It hurt like hell. But Lyra gritted her teeth and didn't make a sound. While the healer worked, Kieran was brought in on the stretcher. The woman immediately moved to him, her expression shifting to deep concern. "Silver poisoning," she said after a quick examination. "Advanced stage. He should be dead." "But he's not," Darien said, "because someone treated him." The healer looked at Lyra with new respect. "You did this? With what supplies?" "Snow, resin, and torn fabric," Lyra said quietly. "It was all I had." The healer shook her head in amazement. "You saved his life. Another hour and the poison would have reached his heart." Darien was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Can you check her for suppression?" The healer nodded and returned to Lyra, this time running her hands along Lyra's spine, her neck, her temples. Her frown deepened with each pass. "Well?" Darien asked. "There's definitely something here," the healer said slowly. "A chemical blockage in her system. It's old, years old, deliberately administered." She looked at Lyra. "Someone's been dosing you with wolfsbane extract, a very specific, very expensive compound designed to suppress the shift without killing the host." Lyra's world tilted. That's impossible. It would have been given in small doses," the healer explained. "Mixed into food or drink. You wouldn't have tasted it, wouldn't have known." "But why?" Lyra's voice cracked. "Why would someone do that to me?" Darien's expression was carved from stone. "Because you're a threat, or you would have been if they'd let you shift." "I don't understand." "Your bloodline," Darien said quietly. "The Hale line doesn't just carry wolf genetics. It carries alpha genetics, strong ones. If you'd been allowed to shift naturally, you would have been powerful, possibly powerful enough to challenge for leadership." Lyra stared at him. "But I'm nobody. I'm weak. Everyone's been lying to you." Darien cut her off. "The question is, who's been poisoning you and why?" Before Lyra could answer, the door burst open. A young wolf stumbled in, his eyes wild. "Alpha, the Iron Pine pack is at the gates, all of them. Alpha Garrick is demanding we hand over Lyra Hale and the wolves who killed his men. Darian's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. How many? He asked calmly. 70, maybe 80. And he thinks that's enough? Darian almost smiled. Tell the sentries to hold position. I'll be there in 5 minutes. The young wolf nodded and ran. Darian turned to Lyra. Stay here. Don't leave this room.
What are you going to do? What I should have done years ago, Darian said. Have a conversation with Garrick Ironpine.
He strode from the room, his presence like a gathering storm. Lyra tried to stand, but the healer pushed her back down. You heard him. Stay put. But he's the Alpha King, the healer said. Trust him to handle this. Lyra wanted to argue, but her body had other ideas. The moment the adrenaline wore off, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Her eyes grew heavy, and despite everything, she felt herself starting to drift. The last thing she heard before sleep took her was the sound of wolves howling in the distance, and a roar that shook the very foundations of the hold. When Lyra woke, the room was dark, except for a single lantern burning on a nearby table. She sat up slowly, her body aching but no longer screaming in pain. Her feet were wrapped in clean bandages, and someone had dressed her in soft wool clothing. Kieran was in the bed across from her, still in wolf form but breathing steadily. The wound on his ribs was properly dressed now, and the black veins of silver poisoning had faded significantly. Lyra pushed herself to her feet, testing her weight. Her feet hurt, but they held. She moved to the door and cracked it open. The corridor outside was empty, but she could hear voices coming from somewhere deeper in the hold. Raised voices, angry voices. Against every instinct telling her to stay put, Lyra stepped into the hallway and followed the sound. It led her to a massive hall, clearly the center of the fortress. And standing in the middle of it, surrounded by at least 100 wolves, were Darian and Garrick. Garrick looked older than Lyra remembered, his face lined with stress, his shoulders tense, but his eyes were the same, hard and unforgiving. No right to harbor her, Garrick was saying. She's Ironpine Pack. That makes her our problem, not yours. She was Ironpine Pack, Darian corrected, his voice calm but edged with steel. Until you exiled her. The moment you cast her out, she became a free wolf. And free wolves can choose their own allegiance. She's not a wolf, Garrick snarled. She's a broken human who couldn't shift if her life depended on it. She's worthless. Is that what you told yourself when you started poisoning her? Darian asked quietly. The hall went silent. Garrick's face drained of color. I don't know what you're... Don't lie to me, Garrick. Darian took a step forward. My healers found wolfsbane extract in her system. Years worth. Someone's been dosing her since she was a child, and the only person with both the motive and the access to do that is you. Garrick's hands clenched into fists. You have no proof. I have her blood, Darian said, which my healers have already tested. The compound matches samples we found in your territory 3 months ago when we investigated the death of Marcus Vane's daughter. Lyra's breath caught. Marcus's daughter had died 2 years ago, a training accident, the pack had said. But now, you've been systematically poisoning anyone in your pack with strong alpha genetics, Darian continued. Anyone who might threaten your leadership. How many, Garrick? How many wolves have you murdered to keep your power? Garrick's face twisted with rage. You know nothing about leading a pack, about the sacrifices necessary to keep wolves alive in this world. I know plenty about sacrifice, Darian said coldly. What I don't know is cowardice. And that's all you are, Garrick. A coward who poisons children because you're too weak to face real competition. Garrick shifted in an instant, a massive brown wolf with silver streaks through his fur. His pack followed suit, dozens of wolves filling the hall with snarls and snapping teeth. But Darian didn't move. His wolves formed a wall around him, their eyes glowing, their bodies coiled and ready. They outnumbered Garrick's pack 2 to 1, and every single one of them looked ready to kill. Stand down, Darian said, his voice carrying absolute authority, or I'll end this right now. Garrick's wolf form trembled with rage, but he didn't attack, because even he wasn't stupid enough to start a war he couldn't win. The girl stays here, Darian said. She's under my protection now. If you have a problem with that, you can file a formal challenge with the Northern Council. But I promise you, Garrick, if you ever come near her again, I'll make sure you regret it for however long you have left to live.
For a long moment, no one moved. Then Garrick shifted back to human form, his eyes blazing with humiliation and fury. "This isn't over." "Yes," Darian said quietly. "It is." Garrick turned and stalked from the hall, his pack following behind him like whipped dogs. The moment they were gone, Darian's shoulders relaxed slightly. He turned and froze when he saw Lyra standing in the doorway. "I thought I told you to stay in the medical wing," he said. "You did," Lyra said. "I didn't listen." Despite everything, Darian's lips twitched into something almost like a smile. "I'm starting to see that's a pattern with you." Lyra stepped into the hall, her heart still racing. "He really did it. Garrick really poisoned me." "Yes." Darian's expression softened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." Lyra's hands clenched into fists. "Just tell me you can fix it." "We can," Darian said. "But the antidote takes time to work. And even once the poison is flushed from your system, there's no guarantee your wolf will emerge." "But there's a chance." "There's a chance." Lyra met his gaze, something fierce and determined burning in her chest. "Then that's enough." Darian studied her for a moment, then nodded. "We'll start treatments tomorrow. For now, you need rest." But as Lyra turned to leave, a wolf burst through the main doors, his eyes wild with panic. "Alpha, the prisoner! He's escaped!" Darian's expression went cold. "How?" "We don't know. The chains were silver reinforced, but The wolf hesitated. "He shifted into something we've never seen before. Something with white fur and blue eyes. He killed 3 guards and disappeared into the mountains." Lyra's blood turned to ice, because she knew exactly what kind of wolf had white fur and blue eyes. The same kind she'd seen in her nightmares since she was a child. The same kind her grandmother used to tell stories about before she died. Frostborn. And if the prisoner was Frostborn, and if Lyra carried that bloodline, then she wasn't just a threat to Garrick's leadership, she was a threat to every alpha in the north. Darian's eyes met hers, and she knew he'd reached the same conclusion. "Lock down the hold," he ordered. "No one in or out until we find him." But Lyra had a feeling it was already too late, because somewhere in the darkness beyond the walls, something was watching, waiting, and it knew exactly who she was. The lockdown happened in minutes. Wolves poured through every corridor of Blackthorn Hold, securing doors, checking windows, forming patrol lines along the outer walls. Darian moved through the chaos like a blade cutting through water, his command sharp and precise, his presence steadying the panic that threatened to overtake his pack. Lyra stood in the great hall, watching it all unfold, her mind racing. Frostborn. The word echoed in her skull like a drumbeat. Her grandmother had told her stories when she was small, tales of ancient wolves with fur like snow and eyes like ice, wolves who could freeze their enemies with a single breath, who commanded winter itself. Lyra had thought they were just stories. Legends meant to entertain children on cold nights. But if the escaped prisoner was Frostborn, then the legends were real, and if her bloodline carried that power. Lyra. Darian's voice cut through her thoughts. He stood in front of her now, his golden eyes searching her face. "What do you know about Frostborn wolves?" She swallowed hard. "Only what my grandmother told me. Stories. She said they were the first wolves, born from the heart of winter, that they ruled the north before the great packs formed." She hesitated. "She said our family descended from them, but I thought she was just trying to make me feel better about not shifting." "Your grandmother was Elena Hale," Darian said, "one of the most respected elders in the Northern Territories. She didn't tell stories without reason." "But why would Garrick poison me if I carried Frostborn blood?" Lyra asked. "If it was just a legend." "Because it's not a legend," a voice said from behind them. Lyra turned to see the healer from earlier, her expression grim. She carried a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. "This is from our archives," the healer said, setting the journal on a nearby table. "Records dating back 200 years. There are mentions of Frostborn wolves throughout, always connected to the same bloodlines. Hale, Winters, Frost, Greystone." She looked at Lyra. "Your family isn't just descended from Frostborn wolves. You are one. Or you would have been, if the poison hadn't suppressed your transformation." The words landed like stones in Lyra's stomach. "I don't understand. If Frostborn wolves were so powerful, why did they disappear?"
They didn't disappear, Darian said quietly. They were hunted, systematically exterminated by the other packs because they were seen as too dangerous, too powerful. The few who survived went into hiding, married into regular wolf lines, diluted their bloodline until the frostborn traits stopped manifesting. He paused. Until now. Lyra's legs felt weak. She sat down hard on a nearby bench. The prisoner. Who was he? His name is Matthias Frost, the healer said. We captured him 3 weeks ago, trying to infiltrate the hold. He wouldn't say why he was here or who sent him, just kept demanding to see the girl with the Hale name.
Lyra's breath caught. He was looking for me? Apparently. Darian's jaw tightened, which means someone told him you existed, someone who knows what you are. Garrick, Lyra whispered. He must have realized what I was when my wolf didn't manifest. That's why he started poisoning me. He was afraid that you'd become more powerful than him, Darian finished. Yes. And if Matthias was coming for you, that means there are other Frostborn out there, possibly organizing,
possibly planning something. The implications crashed over Lyra like a wave. She wasn't just a broken wolf. She was the last known member of a bloodline that had been hunted to near extinction, and now someone wanted her badly enough to send a Frostborn assassin. We need to start the treatments immediately, Darian said, turning to the healer. If Matthias comes back, and he will, she needs to be able to defend herself. The healer nodded. I'll prepare the antidote. But Alpha, you need to understand. The process is painful. Her body has been suppressed for so long that forcing the transformation could kill her. Then we'll take precautions, Darian said. But we're doing it. Tonight. Lyra stood, her hands shaking. Wait, you're talking about me like I'm not standing right here. Don't I get a say in this? Darian turned to her, his expression softening slightly. Of course you do. But understand what you're choosing. If we flush the poison from your system and you survive the transformation, you'll be hunted by every Alpha who fears the Frostborn. Your life will never be peaceful again. And if I don't? Lyra asked. Then you stay suppressed, stay human, and Matthias will keep coming until he either takes you or kills you. Lyra looked between them, her heart pounding. Neither option was good, but only one gave her the chance to fight back. Do it, she said. I'm tired of being weak. I'm tired of running. If I have power, then I want it. Darian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, we start in 1 hour. Sarah, get the medical wing prepared. The healer, Sarah, nodded and hurried away, already calling orders to her assistants. Darian gestured for Lyra to follow him, leading her through the maze of corridors to a private chamber. It was simple but comfortable, with a bed covered in thick furs, a fireplace crackling with warmth, and a window overlooking the mountains. Rest while you can, Darian said. The next few hours are going to be hell. Lyra sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. Can I ask you something? Yes. Why are you helping me? You barely know me, and taking me in could start a war with Ironpine. Darian was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. Because your father saved my life. Because what Garrick did to you is unconscionable. And because, he paused, choosing his words carefully, because I've seen too many wolves crushed under the weight of corrupt leadership. If I can prevent that from happening to you, I will. Lyra met his gaze, seeing the weight of responsibility in those golden eyes. Thank you. Darian nodded once, then turned to leave, but at the door he stopped. Lyra, if this works, if you transform, you need to be prepared for what comes next. The Frostborn weren't just powerful. They were different. Their instincts, their nature, even the way they thought was fundamentally unlike other wolves. You won't just gain power. You'll become something else entirely. I understand, Lyra said, though she wasn't sure she did. Darian left, and Lyra lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear and anticipation. In an hour, everything would change. She would either become what she was meant to be, or she would die trying. She didn't know which option scared her more. The hour passed too quickly. When Sarah came to collect her, Lyra's hands were steady, but her heart was racing. They walked through the hold in silence, eventually arriving at a large chamber deep underground. The walls were reinforced with iron and silver, and runes had been carved into every surface. This is the transformation chamber, Sarah explained. We use it for wolves who are having trouble with their first shift. The runes help contain the energy and prevent injury to surrounding structures. In the center of the room was a circular platform surrounded by channels carved into the stone. Darian stood beside it, along with 3 other wolves Lyra didn't recognize. "These are my most experienced healers," Darian said. "They'll monitor your vitals and intervene if anything goes wrong." Lyra stepped onto the platform, her bare feet cold against the stone. "What do I need to do?" "Drink this." Sarah handed her a small vial filled with silver liquid. "It's the antidote. It will neutralize the wolfsbane in your system. Once it takes effect, your body will try to shift automatically. Don't fight it. Let it happen." Lyra took the vial with shaking hands. The liquid inside seemed to glow faintly, casting strange shadows on her skin. She looked at Darian. "If I don't make it—" "You will," Darian said firmly. "You're stronger than you know." Lyra hoped he was right. She uncorked the vial and drank. The liquid burned going down like swallowing fire. Lyra gasped, her hands flying to her throat, but the sensation passed quickly. For a moment nothing happened, then the pain started. It began in her chest, a pressure that felt like her ribs were being crushed. Lyra doubled over, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. The pressure spread outward, racing through her limbs, her spine, her skull. "Vitals are spiking," one of the healers said, his voice tight with concern. "Heart rate 160 and climbing." "Stay with it, Lyra." Darian's voice cut through the haze of pain. "Your body is fighting the change. You need to let go." But Lyra couldn't let go. The pain was too intense, too all-consuming. It felt like her bones were breaking and reforming, like her skin was being peeled away and replaced. She screamed, the sound tearing from her throat like something animal. "She's seizing!" another healer shouted. "Hold her down!" Hands grabbed her arms and legs, pinning her to the platform. Lyra thrashed against them, her vision going white, her mind fracturing under the agony. And then, somewhere deep inside her, something snapped. It wasn't a bone or a muscle. It was something deeper, something fundamental, like a door that had been locked her entire life suddenly bursting open. Power flooded through her. Not the warm, earthy power she'd felt from other wolves. This was cold, ancient, vast. It filled every cell of her body, rewriting her from the inside out. The healers stumbled backward as frost began to spread across the platform, creeping up the walls in delicate crystalline patterns. The temperature in the room plummeted. "What's happening?" Sarah's voice was sharp with alarm. "Her wolf is emerging," Darian said, his eyes wide. "Everyone get back. Now!" Lyra felt her body convulsing, changing. Her bones lengthened, her muscles twisted and reformed. Fur erupted across her skin, not brown or gray or black, but pure white, like fresh snow. Her senses exploded outward, suddenly able to hear heartbeats 3 rooms away, smell fear and copper and stone. And then it was over. Lyra stood on 4 legs instead of 2, her body massive and powerful. She looked down at herself, at paws the size of dinner plates, at fur that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. She turned her head and caught her reflection in the ice spreading across the walls. Her eyes were no longer brown. They were blue, pale, crystalline blue, like frozen lakes under winter sky. She was frostborn. "Impossible," one of the healers whispered. "The records said frostborn wolves were extinct." "Clearly the records were wrong," Darian said. He approached slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Lyra, can you hear me?" Lyra tried to respond, but what came out was a sound somewhere between a growl and a howl. Her new body felt foreign, powerful, terrifying. She could feel the cold radiating from her, could sense the way it responded to her emotions. "Easy," Darian said softly. "You're safe. You did it. You transformed." Lyra took a step forward, and ice crackled beneath her paws. She stumbled, unused to the weight and size of her new form, and Darian caught her before she fell. "It takes time to adjust," he said. "Don't try to shift back yet. Let your wolf settle first." Lyra wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers about what she'd become, but exhaustion was already creeping in. The transformation had drained her completely. Darian seemed to sense it. "Sarah, prepare a recovery room, and someone get word to Kieran that his patient is officially a wolf now. I think he'll want to know." They helped Lyra out of the transformation chamber and into a larger space lined with soft bedding. She collapsed onto it gratefully, her massive body curling instinctively into a defensive position. Darian knelt beside her. "Sleep. We'll talk when you wake." But Lyra couldn't sleep. Not yet. Because through the walls of the hold, she could hear something. A howl, distant but distinct, and it was calling her name. Lyra's eyes snapped open, her ears swiveling toward the sound. Darian heard it too. His expression went hard. "Matthias," he said. "He knows." Before anyone could respond, an alarm rang through the hold, 3 sharp bells that made every wolf freeze. "Breach!" someone shouted from outside. "North wall!" Darian was on his feet instantly. "How many?" A guard burst into the room, his face pale. "Just one, Alpha, but he's not attacking. He's just standing there, at the gate, waiting." "For what?" Sarah demanded. The guard's eyes found Lyra. "For her." Darian's jaw clenched. "Lock down every entrance. No one goes in or out without my direct order." "Alpha, with respect, we should just kill him. He's one wolf against 100 to 8. He's frostborn," Darian cut him off, "which means he's worth 10 normal wolves at minimum. And if we kill him, we'll never know who sent him or why." He looked at Lyra. "Can you stand?" Lyra pushed herself up on shaking legs. Her wolf body was still unfamiliar, but adrenaline was overriding the exhaustion. "I'm going to talk to him," Darian said, "and you're coming with me. If he wants you, he's going to have to go through me first." They made their way to the north wall, Lyra's massive paws silent on the stone floors. Wolves lined the corridors, their eyes wide as they watched her pass. Some looked awed, others looked afraid. When they reached the wall, Darian climbed the stairs to the ramparts, and Lyra followed. The cold night air hit her face, but she barely felt it. Her frostborn body seemed immune to temperature. At the base of the wall, standing perfectly still in the snow, was a wolf. It was smaller than Lyra, but no less impressive. Its fur was white with streaks of silver, and its eyes glowed the same pale blue as hers. It sat calmly, making no aggressive moves, simply watching, waiting. Darian leaned over the edge of the wall. "Matthias Frost, you're trespassing on Blackthorn territory. State your business or leave." The white wolf shifted, bones cracking and reforming until a man stood in its place. He was tall and lean, with white blonde hair and sharp features. His eyes were the same unsettling blue. "I'm here for the girl," Matthias said, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "The one with hail blood. I know she's in there. I can smell her." "She's under my protection," Darian said coldly, "which means she's none of your concern." "That's where you're wrong, Alpha King." Matthias smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Lyra Hale isn't just any wolf. She's the last pure frostborn in existence, and that makes her very much my concern." Lyra's breath caught. Pure frostborn? What did that mean? "The frostborn bloodline was supposed to die out," Matthias continued. "Hunted, scattered, bred out of existence. But someone made a mistake. They let Elena Hale live long enough to have children, and those children had children, and now—" His eyes found Lyra on the wall above. "Now we have you." "Who sent you?" Darian demanded. "No one sent me," Matthias said. "I came of my own accord, because Lyra and I are the same. We're the last of our kind, and there are people, powerful people, who want us dead before we can rebuild what was taken from us." "Rebuild what?" Lyra's voice came out as a growl, strange and deep, but Matthias seemed to understand her. "Our pack," Matthias said. "The Frostborn weren't just wolves, Lyra. We were rulers. We controlled the entire North before the other bloodlines rose up against us. They feared our power, so they destroyed us. But they made a mistake. They left survivors. And survivors remember." "You're talking about revenge," Darian said flatly. "Starting a war over something that happened 2 centuries ago." "I'm talking about justice," Matthias corrected. "The packs that killed our ancestors still exist, still hold power, still benefit from the genocide they committed. Why should we let that stand?" "Because revenge won't bring back the dead," Darian said. "It'll only create more bodies." Matthias laughed, cold and sharp. "You're a good alpha, Darian Blackthorn, strong, fair. But you're not Frostborn. You don't understand what it's like to know your entire bloodline was wiped out because they were too powerful, too different. To know you only exist because your ancestors hid and pretended to be something they weren't. He turned his attention back to Lyra. I'm offering you a choice. Come with me. Let me teach you what you are, what you can become. Together, we can restore the Frostborn to their rightful place. And if I refuse? Lyra asked. Then you'll die, Matthias said simply. Not by my hand, but by theirs. The moment the other alphas learn a pure Frostborn still exists, they'll come for you. And no fortress, no matter how well defended, will keep them out forever. Silence fell over the wall. Darian's hand moved to Lyra's shoulder, a grounding touch. Don't listen to him. He's trying to manipulate you. Is he? Lyra asked quietly. Because everything he's saying makes sense. Garrick poisoned me because he was afraid of what I might become. The Northern Council will do the same if they find out. Where does that leave me? Here, Darian said firmly. Protected. We'll find a way. There is no way, Matthias interrupted. The only path forward for Lyra is to embrace what she is, to stop hiding, to claim her power and make the North remember why the Frostborn were feared. Lyra looked down at the white wolf standing in the snow, and something in her chest ached. He was right about one thing. She and Matthias were the same. Both of them were the last remnants of something ancient and powerful. Both of them had been hunted, feared, suppressed. But that didn't mean his path was the right one. I'm not interested in revenge, Lyra said slowly, her voice steadying, or in rebuilding an empire. I'm interested in living, and I can't do that if I'm constantly looking over my shoulder waiting for the next assassin. Then what do you propose? Matthias asked. Lyra took a breath, and when she spoke, her voice carried a certainty she hadn't felt before. I propose we change the rules. Make the Northern Council recognize Frostborn as a legitimate bloodline. Force them to acknowledge our right to exist without being hunted. Matthias stared at her. You think they'll just agree to that? No, Lyra said, but I think they'll listen if we make them. Darian's hand tightened on her shoulder. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that the Northern Council meets in 3 weeks, Lyra said, turning to look at him. And according to Northern law, any wolf with alpha bloodline has the right to petition for pack recognition. I'm going to petition for the Frostborn to be reinstated as an official pack. That's suicide, Matthias said flatly. They'll never allow it. Then I'll make them, Lyra said, through challenge if necessary. Darian's eyes widened. Lyra, you can't be serious. You've been a wolf for less than an hour. You don't know how to fight. Then teach me, Lyra said, meeting his gaze. You have 3 weeks. Use them. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Matthias threw his head back and laughed, a genuine surprise sound. You're insane. I like that. Does that mean you'll help? Lyra asked. Matthias tilted his head, considering. If you're really going to walk into the council and demand recognition, you're going to need more than just Blackthorn's protection. You're going to need someone who knows the old ways, someone who can teach you what it means to be Frostborn. Are you volunteering? Darian asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. I'm offering a temporary alliance, Matthias said. I train Lyra. You provide security. And in 3 weeks, we go to the council together and force them to acknowledge what they tried to erase. And after that, Darian pressed, after that, we see what happens. Matthias's smile was sharp. But I promise you, Alpha King, if the council refuses and tries to kill us, I won't hesitate to burn their entire assembly to ash. Darian looked at Lyra. This is your decision. But understand, the moment you petition the council, you're painting a target on your back. Every alpha who fears the Frostborn will come for you. They're already coming for me, Lyra said quietly. At least this way I'm fighting back. Darian was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, but we do this my way. Matthias enters the hold under guard. He trains you, but he doesn't leave your side unsupervised. And the moment I think he's a threat, he's gone. Agreed? Agreed, Lyra said. Matthias inclined his head. I can work with that. Darian gave orders for the gate to be opened, and Matthias was escorted inside by 6 heavily armed wolves. As he passed Lyra, he studied her with those unsettling blue eyes. You're braver than I expected, he said quietly. Or more foolish. Time will tell which. Probably both, Lyra admitted. Matthias smiled. Good. Cowards don't change the world. Over the next 3 weeks, Blackthorn Hold transformed into a training ground. Every morning before dawn, Lyra met Matthias in the courtyard, where he pushed her body to its limits. He taught her how to move in her wolf form, how to use her size and strength, how to channel the cold that lived in her bones into something devastating. And every afternoon, Darian took over, teaching her strategy, pack politics, the intricate web of alliances and rivalries that governed the Northern Territories. At night, Sarah monitored her recovery, making sure the transformation was stable, that her body was adapting to its new reality. It was brutal, exhausting. But Lyra thrived under it. She could feel herself getting stronger, faster, more confident. The wolf that had been locked inside her for 22 years was finally free, and it was hungry for everything it had been denied. Kieran joined the training sessions too, his black wolf form a perfect sparring partner. He was relentless, pushing Lyra to think 3 moves ahead, to anticipate attacks before they came. More than once, she ended the day bruised and bleeding, but she never complained. "You're learning fast," Matthias observed one evening after a particularly brutal session. "Faster than any wolf I've trained." "I have good teachers," Lyra said, wincing as Sarah wrapped her ribs. "You have motivation," Matthias corrected. "That's worth more than any technique." On the 15th day, Darian brought her to his private study and spread a map across the table. It showed the Northern Territories in intricate detail, every pack, every border, every alliance marked in different colors. "This is what you're walking into," Darian said. 12 alphas, each one representing a major pack. Some will be sympathetic to your cause. Most won't. And at least 3 will try to kill you the moment you set foot in the council chamber. "Which 3? Lyra asked. Darian pointed to 3 territories on the map. Alpha Morgana of Greystone. She's the council leader and a traditionalist. She believes the Frostborn Purge was necessary. Alpha Victor of Ravenclaw. His grandfather led the final assault against the Frostborn stronghold. And his finger moved to Ironpine territory. Garrick. Lyra's jaw tightened. Garrick will be there. He has to be, Darian said. Every alpha on the council is required to attend, and he'll be looking for revenge after what happened with Kieran. Good, Lyra said coldly. Let him try. Darian studied her for a moment. You've changed. In 3 weeks, you've gone from a frightened exile to this. This? Lyra asked. A predator, Darian said simply. It's in the way you move now, the way you talk. You're not afraid anymore. I'm terrified, Lyra admitted, but I'm done letting fear control me. Darian nodded slowly. That's the difference between a survivor and a leader. On the morning of the 21st day, Lyra stood in the courtyard for her final training session. Matthias faced her in wolf form, his silver-streaked fur gleaming in the dawn light. One last test, he said. Show me everything you've learned. They circled each other, neither willing to make the first move. Then Matthias lunged, faster than Lyra expected. She dodged left, using the technique Kieran had drilled into her, and struck back with her claws. Matthias twisted midair, avoiding the blow, and came at her from a different angle. They fought for 10 minutes, trading blows, neither gaining the upper hand. Lyra could feel her power building, the cold responding to her will. Finally, she saw her opening. Matthias overextended on a lunge, and Lyra hit him with everything she had, claws, teeth, and a burst of freezing energy that sent him skidding across the courtyard. He shifted back to human form, laughing. Not bad at all. Lyra shifted too, her chest heaving. Did I pass? You'll do, Matthias said. Just remember, the council won't fight fair. They'll use every rule, every loophole, every dirty trick they can think of to deny you. Then I'll have to be better than fair, Lyra said. That night, Darian held a small ceremony in the Great Hall. Every wolf in Blackthorn Hold attended, watching as he presented Lyra with a cloak, white fur trimmed with silver, the traditional garb of a pack petitioner. Tomorrow, you go before the Northern Council, Darian said, his voice carrying through the hall. You'll be representing not just yourself, but every wolf who's ever been suppressed, exiled, or deemed too different to belong. That's a heavy burden. He placed the cloak around her shoulders. But I believe you can carry it, and everyone in this hall believes it too. The wolves erupted in howls of support, the sound shaking the rafters. Lyra stood there, wrapped in white fur, surrounded by wolves who'd become her family in just 3 weeks. And for the first time since her exile, she felt like she truly belonged somewhere. On the morning of the council meeting, Lyra stood in front of a mirror in her chambers studying her reflection. She wore practical clothing, leather and fur, built for movement, but there was nothing ordinary about the way she looked. Her white hair fell loose around her shoulders, and her pale blue eyes seemed to glow in the morning light. She looked like what she was. Frostborn. A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. Darian stepped inside, already dressed for the journey.
"Ready?" he asked. Lyra turned to face him. "As ready as I'll ever be." Darian studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You've come a long way in 3 weeks. Your father would be proud." The words landed softly, unexpectedly. Lyra's throat tightened. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Darian said. "We still have to survive the council." They left the hold with an escort of 20 wolves, Matthias among them. The journey to the council grounds took 2 days, and by the time they arrived, word had already spread. The Frostborn girl was coming, and the North was waiting to see if she would rise or burn. The council grounds sat in a valley between 3 mountains, a neutral territory claimed by no single pack. The meeting hall itself was ancient, carved from black stone and reinforced with iron, large enough to hold representatives from every pack in the northern territories. Banners hung from the rafters, each one bearing the symbol of a different bloodline. Iron Pine's crossed axes, Blackthorn's thorned crown, Ravenclaw's talons, Greystone's mountain peak, 24 others, each representing centuries of history and power. But nowhere among those banners was there a symbol for the Frostborn. Lyra stood at the edge of the valley with Darian's escort, staring down at the hall. Wolves were already gathering, hundreds of them, representatives and guards, advisors and elders. She could see Garrick among them, his gray head unmistakable even from a distance. He was speaking with other alphas, his gestures sharp and angry, clearly working to turn sentiment against her before she even arrived. "He's already poisoning the well," Matthias said quietly, appearing at her shoulder. His white blonde hair caught the morning light, making him look almost ethereal. "Telling them you're a threat, that Frostborn can't be trusted, that history will repeat itself if they give you even an inch." "Let him talk," Lyra said, her voice steadier than she felt. Her hands were clenched at her sides, hidden beneath the white fur cloak Darian had given her. "Words won't matter once I'm inside that hall. Only actions will." Darian approached from behind, Kieran at his side. The black wolf had recovered fully from his injuries and now moved with the same lethal grace as his brother. Over the past 3 weeks, he'd been the one pushing Lyra hardest during training, testing her limits, forcing her to think like a predator instead of prey. He'd taught her that being Frostborn meant more than just power. It meant knowing when to use it and when to hold back. "The council is convening in 1 hour, Darian said, his golden eyes scanning the valley below. "Once we enter, there's no turning back. If you want to withdraw your petition—" "I don't," Lyra said firmly, meeting his gaze without flinching. Darian nodded, though something flickered in his expression, pride mixed with concern. "Then let's review the process one more time. You'll present your petition to the council in the formal chamber. They'll deliberate, likely for hours. If they accept, the Frostborn will be recognized as an official pack with all the rights and protections that entails. Territory rights, representation at future councils, legal standing in disputes." "And if they refuse?" Lyra asked, though she already knew the answer. They'd gone over this scenario a dozen times. "Then you have the right to challenge for recognition through combat," Darian said, his voice dropping lower. "Single combat against the alpha of your choosing. If you win, your petition is automatically approved by Northern law. If you lose—" He paused, the weight of that possibility hanging in the air. "I won't lose," Lyra said, her voice carrying absolute conviction. Matthias smiled slightly, his blue eyes gleaming with approval. "Confident? I like it. But remember what I taught you during training. Frostborn's strength isn't just physical, it's environmental. You control the cold, the ice, the very temperature around you. That's your advantage. Use it strategically, not recklessly." Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the power that lived beneath her skin like a second heartbeat.
Over the past 3 weeks, she'd learned to channel it with increasing precision, to freeze the moisture in the air, to create ice from nothing, to lower the temperature in a room by 20 degrees with just a thought. But she'd also learned its cost. The cold took energy, drained her faster than normal wolf abilities. She had to be smart about when and how she used it. "It's time," Darian said, his voice cutting through her thoughts. They descended into the valley in formation. Darian at the front, Lyra beside him, Matthias on her other side, surrounded by 20 of Blackthorn's finest warriors. As they approached the entrance to the hall, other wolves stopped to stare. Conversations died mid-sentence. Lyra could feel their eyes on her, measuring, judging, fearing. Her white fur cloak stood out like a beacon among the darker colors worn by the other packs, and her pale blue eyes marked her as fundamentally different from every other wolf present. Good. Let them see. Let them fear. She was done hiding what she was. The hall's interior was even more imposing than the outside. The ceiling soared overhead, supported by massive pillars carved with scenes from northern wolf history. Great battles, legendary alphas, territorial disputes settled through blood and honor. At the far end sat the council table, a curved structure of dark wood where 12 alphas sat in judgment, each one representing a major pack. Their combined authority was absolute within these walls, their decisions binding on every wolf in the northern territories. Garrick sat among them in the iron pine seat, his face carefully neutral when he saw Lyra enter, but his hands clenched into fists on the polished wood surface, knuckles going white. She could see the barely controlled rage in his eyes, the humiliation of being challenged by the wolf he'd tried to kill still burning in his chest. At the center of the council sat an older woman with silver hair pulled back in an intricate braid and eyes like chips of winter ice. Alpha Morgana of the Greystone Pack, the council's elected leader. She'd held the position for 30 years, longer than any other alpha in recent history. Her reputation was legendary, fair but uncompromising, brilliant but traditional. She believed in the old ways, the old rules, and she had little patience for anything that threatened the stability of the northern territories. "Approach," Morgana said, her voice carrying easily through the hall despite not being raised. Command and authority resonated in every syllable. Lyra walked forward, acutely aware of the hundreds of eyes watching her every move. She could hear whispers from the gallery, could smell the mixture of curiosity and fear radiating from the assembled wolves. She stopped exactly 10 feet from the council table, the formal distance prescribed by northern law, and shifted to human form. The transformation was smoother now, practiced, taking only seconds instead of the minutes it had required during her first attempts. She stood before them in simple but well-made clothing, leather pants, a fitted tunic, practical boots, with her white hair falling loose around her shoulders. Even in human form, her pale blue eyes marked her as different, as Frostborn. "State your name and purpose," Morgana said, her voice formal and precise. "My name is Lyra Hale," Lyra said clearly, projecting her voice so every wolf in the chamber could hear. "Daughter of Thomas Hale, granddaughter of Elena Hale, descended from the Frostborn bloodline through 7 generations of direct lineage. I come before this council to petition for recognition of the Frostborn as an official pack of the Northern Territories, with all rights, privileges, and responsibilities that designation entails." Silence fell over the hall like a blanket of fresh snow. Then chaos erupted. Wolves began shouting from the gallery, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of anger and fear. "The Frostborn are extinct. They're too dangerous. This is an insult to our ancestors. My grandfather died fighting them. We can't let this happen." Morgana raised one hand and the hall fell silent immediately, as if she'd commanded the very air to still. "The Frostborn were declared extinct 73 years ago by unanimous council vote," she said, her voice measured and controlled. "On what grounds do you claim otherwise?" "On the grounds that I'm standing in front of you," Lyra said, gesturing to herself. "Living, breathing proof that the bloodline survived the purge, that your ancestors' genocide was incomplete." The word genocide sent another ripple of angry muttering through the crowd, but Morgana's raised hand silenced it before it could build. Garrick leaned forward in his seat, his face twisted with barely controlled fury. "One wolf does not make a pack, girl, and frankly, we only have your word that you're actually Frostborn. For all we know, you could be a blackthorn plant trying to destabilize the council with manufactured claims and parlor tricks.
I can prove my lineage, Lyra said calmly. She held up one hand, palm facing upward, and concentrated. Frost began to spread across her skin, crystallizing into intricate patterns that resembled snowflakes. The temperature in her immediate vicinity dropped 10 degrees. Several wolves in the front row shifted uncomfortably, their breath suddenly visible in the cold air radiating from her body. Parlor tricks, Garrick dismissed with a wave of his hand.
Ice manipulation can be learned through training and discipline. It doesn't prove bloodline heritage. Any wolf with enough dedication could learn to do that. Then what would satisfy you? Lyra asked, her voice sharpening. What proof would you accept that I am what I claim to be? Nothing, Garrick said flatly, his voice dropping to something cold and final. Because Frostborn bloodline is extinct, dead, gone. And even if you somehow carried remnants of it in your genetics, that doesn't change the fundamental fact that the Frostborn were eliminated for very good reasons. They were unstable, violent, power-hungry. They couldn't be controlled, couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't coexist peacefully with other packs. We were powerful, Matthias said from behind Lyra, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade through silk. And you feared us for it. Fear breeds hatred, and hatred breeds murder. That's the real history of the Frostborn Purge. Morgana's eyes narrowed as she focused on Matthias. Matthias Frost. I was told you'd been captured by Blackthorn forces 3 weeks ago, imprisoned for attempted infiltration. I was, Matthias said calmly, stepping forward to stand beside Lyra. And then I was released when Alpha Darien realized that my only crime was trying to find another survivor of my bloodline. Unlike this council, he understands that genocide is not a valid form of pack management. Watch your tongue, rogue. One of the other alphas, a broad-shouldered man with a scarred face and missing ear, growled. You're speaking to the Northern Council, not some backwoods pack tribunal. I'm speaking to the people who ordered the execution of my entire bloodline, Matthias corrected, his voice remaining steady and cold. So, the wolves who decided that being powerful was a crime worthy of extermination. So forgive me if I'm not particularly deferential to your authority. Morgana raised her hand again, silencing the angry responses before they could build into something uncontrollable. The Frostborn Purge was enacted by the council of that era, not this one. We cannot and should not be held accountable for decisions made before most of us were born. But you can be held accountable for perpetuating those decisions, Lyra said, her voice ringing clear and strong through the chamber. For maintaining a system that says some wolves are too dangerous to exist based solely on their genetics and bloodline. That's not justice. That's not law. That's tyranny dressed up in legal language. Morgana studied her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. You speak well for someone so young and inexperienced, but pretty words don't change fundamental facts. The Frostborn were eliminated because they posed a genuine, documented threat to every pack in the Northern Territories. Their power was too great, too unpredictable, too easy to abuse. Then let me prove you wrong, Lyra said, taking a step forward. Give me recognition. Let me build a pack that shows Frostborn can coexist peacefully with other bloodlines. Let me demonstrate that we're not the monsters your history books claim we were. And if you're lying, another alpha asked from the table, if you use that recognition to rebuild the Frostborn armies and wage war on the rest of us the way your ancestors did, what then? Then you'll have legal grounds to revoke recognition and eliminate the threat, Lyra said simply. But you can't punish me for crimes I haven't committed, for crimes my ancestors allegedly committed 2 centuries ago. That's not justice, that's prejudice. Garrick slammed his hand on the table hard enough to make the wood crack. This is absurd. We're seriously considering legitimizing a bloodline that nearly destroyed the entire North? That killed thousands of innocent wolves in their quest for absolute dominance? Have we learned nothing from history? The historical records are incomplete, Darien said, stepping forward to stand beside Lyra. His presence was commanding, and several of the council members shifted in their seats, recognizing the weight he carried as Alpha King of the largest territory in the North, and heavily biased by the victors who wrote them. We don't actually know what the Frostborn did or didn't do with any certainty. We only know what the packs who hunted them into extinction claimed they did. Are you defending them, Blackthorn? The scarred alpha demanded, his voice rising. Are you actually taking the side of the bloodline that murdered your own great-grandfather? I'm defending the principle of fair judgment, Darian said coolly, his golden eyes hard as stone, and the right of any wolf to exist without being murdered for their genetics. If we start deciding which bloodlines deserve to live and which deserve to die, where does it end? Who's next on the purge list? Morgana leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled in front of her face. The council will deliberate on this petition. Lyra Hale, you and your companions will wait outside the chamber while we discuss the matter. We'll summon you when we've reached a decision. Lyra wanted to argue, to demand they make a decision now while the momentum was on her side, but Darian's hand on her shoulder stopped her. She understood the message. Patience now, action later. She nodded once, her chin held high, and turned to walk back through the hall. The journey through the assembled wolves felt longer than the walk in. She could feel their eyes boring into her back, could hear the whispers starting before she'd even reached the doors. Some voices were sympathetic, others hostile, most simply confused and uncertain. Outside, the sun was climbing higher in the sky, burning away the morning mist and illuminating the valley in harsh, clear light. Lyra paced the length of the clearing like a caged predator, her energy too volatile to allow her to stand still. Her wolf was close to the surface, responding to her agitation, wanting to emerge and fight. They're going to refuse, she said, not looking at Darian or Matthias. I can feel it. The decision was made before I even walked into that chamber. Probably, Matthias agreed with brutal honesty. He was leaning against a tree, looking deceptively relaxed, but Lyra could see the tension in his shoulders. Which means you'll need to challenge. It's the only way forward now. Who? Lyra asked, turning to face them. Morgana? She's the council leader, the most powerful voice. Too experienced, Darian cut in, shaking his head firmly. She's been alpha for 3 decades and fought in 2 territorial wars. Even with Frostborn power, you're not ready for someone with that level of combat experience and tactical knowledge. Then who? Lyra pressed, frustration bleeding into her voice. Darian's jaw tightened, and she saw the answer in his eyes before he spoke. Garrick? Lyra's breath caught in her throat. You want me to challenge Garrick? The alpha who exiled me? Who poisoned me for years? He's the weakest alpha on that council, Darian said bluntly. And he's the one who wronged you personally. If you defeat him, it sends a message that resonates beyond just pack recognition. It shows the Frostborn are back, and they won't be victims anymore. It's personal and political at the same time. Plus, Matthias added with a sharp, predatory smile, it would be poetic justice of the highest order. The man who tried to suppress your power being publicly defeated by it. The alpha who cast you out to die watching you claim his territory. Perfect symmetry. Lyra looked between them, her heart pounding. You both really think I can win against him? Yes, Darian said without hesitation. His golden eyes locked on hers with absolute certainty. But you need to be smart about it. Garrick is a veteran fighter with decades of experience. He'll have tricks, dirty tactics, psychological warfare. You have raw power and youth. Use your advantages to overwhelm him before he can adapt to your fighting style. Before Lyra could respond, the hall doors opened with a heavy groan of wood and iron. A young wolf emerged, his face carefully neutral, and gestured for them to return. The council had reached their decision. Lyra walked back into the hall, feeling like she was walking toward her execution. Her heart pounded against her ribs, and her palms were sweating despite the cold that always surrounded her now. The alphas sat in stony silence, their expressions carefully controlled and unreadable. Morgana stood, her silver hair catching the light from the high windows. Lyra Hale, she said with formal precision. The council has deliberated on your petition for recognition of the Frostborn bloodline as an official pack of the Northern Territories. After careful consideration of historical precedent, current security concerns, and the potential risks to regional stability, we have reached a unanimous decision. Lyra braced herself, her hands clenched at her sides. Your petition is denied. The words hit like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. Around the hall, wolves began murmuring, some satisfied, others sympathetic. Many simply relieved that the uncomfortable situation had been resolved in favor of tradition. Morgana continued in the same measured tone. The Frostborn bloodline represents too great a risk to the stability and security of the Northern Territories. While we acknowledge your personal situation is regrettable and that you appear to have been treated unjustly by your former pack, we cannot in good conscience legitimize a bloodline with such a violent and destructive historical record. The safety of thousands of wolves must take precedence over the desires of one individual. On what grounds? Lyra demanded, her voice shaking with controlled fury. You have no evidence I'm dangerous, no proof I intend harm to anyone. You're condemning me based on things that allegedly happened 200 years ago. We don't need proof of your personal intentions, Garrick said, standing with obvious satisfaction. We need to protect our packs from potential threats, and that means keeping bloodlines like yours from gaining any kind of official power or legitimacy. It's called preventive security. Then I invoke my right of challenge, Lyra said, the words coming out sharp and clear, cutting through the murmurs like a knife. The hall went completely silent, every eye fixed on her. Morgana's eyebrows rose slightly, the first crack in her composed expression. You wish to challenge for recognition under the ancient laws? I do. Lyra's voice was steady now, her decision made. And I choose my opponent. She turned, her pale blue eyes locking onto Garrick with the intensity of a predator sighting prey. I challenge Alpha Garrick Ironpine, single combat under Northern law. If I win, the Council recognizes the Frostborn bloodline. If I lose, I'll accept your judgment and leave the Northern Territories forever. Garrick's face went pale, then flushed red with fury and embarrassment. You can't be serious. You've been a wolf for 3 weeks. Are you afraid? Lyra asked softly, her voice carrying through the silent hall. The great Alpha Garrick, terrified of a girl he tried to murder? The mighty leader of Ironpine, scared of the wolf he spent years poisoning and suppressing? The hall went completely, utterly silent. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Garrick's hands trembled with rage. I'll destroy you, girl. I'll tear you apart and scatter your bones across these mountains as a warning to anyone else who thinks they can. Then accept the challenge, Lyra interrupted, her voice cold as winter itself. Morgana looked between them, clearly calculating the political implications. Alpha Garrick, do you accept this challenge? Be aware that refusal will be noted in the official records. Garrick's jaw worked, his teeth grinding together. He was trapped, and he knew it. Refusing would make him look weak in front of every alpha in the north. But accepting meant fighting a frostborn wolf with powers he didn't fully understand. Still, his pride and his rage won out over his tactical sense. I accept, he snarled, and when I'm done with you, there won't be enough left to bury. The challenge is issued and accepted, Morgana declared, her voice ringing through the chamber. Combat will take place immediately in this hall. The duel will continue until one party yields, is unable to continue, or dies. Are both parties ready? Ready, Garrick growled, already starting to strip off his outer clothes. Ready, Lyra said, her voice steady. Then prepare yourselves, Morgana said. Clear the center floor. Wolves scrambled to create an open space in the middle of the hall, pushing back chairs and tables, forming a large circle. Lyra moved to one side, removing her white fur cloak and outer layers until she wore only light undergarments that would shift with her. Her fingers trembled slightly as she folded the cloak, and Darian appeared at her side. Remember what we practiced, he said quietly, his voice for her ears only. Fast and overwhelming. Don't give him time to think. Don't let him use his experience against you. Hit hard, hit fast, and don't stop until he can't get back up. I know, Lyra said, handing him the cloak. And Lyra? Darian's hand caught her arm, his grip firm and reassuring. Win. Not for recognition or politics or revenge. Win because you deserve to live without fear. Win because you've earned the right to exist. She met his eyes and nodded, seeing belief and pride reflected in those golden depths. Across the circle, Garrick had stripped to his skin, his scarred body a testament to decades of fighting and surviving. He was massive, easily twice Lyra's mass, his muscles built from a lifetime of combat. Scars crisscrossed his chest and arms, silver lines marking where he'd survived wounds that should have killed him. Lyra took a deep breath and walked to her side of the circle. Morgana stood at the edge, her voice ringing out clearly. The challenge is issued and accepted. Combat will continue until one party yields or is unable to continue. Death is permitted, but not required. Are both parties ready to begin? Ready, Garrick growled, his eyes promising violence and death. Ready, Lyra said, her voice calm. Begin. Both wolves shifted simultaneously. Lyra's transformation was smooth and practiced now, her white fur gleaming under the hall's lights like fresh snow under moonlight. She stood nearly as tall as a horse, her pale blue eyes blazing with cold fire. Garrick became a massive brown wolf with silver streaks through his fur, easily twice her age and scarred from countless battles. His wolf form was huge, built for power and endurance, a veteran warrior who'd survived challenges from younger, stronger opponents. They circled each other slowly, neither willing to make the first move. Lyra could hear her own heartbeat, could smell the mixture of fear and anticipation from the watching wolves. Everything she'd trained for came down to this moment. Garrick's lips pulled back in a snarl, revealing teeth yellowed with age but still deadly sharp. You should have stayed dead, girl. Your father would be ashamed of what you've become. A freak, a monster, an abomination that should never have existed. The words were meant to hurt, to distract, to make her angry and sloppy. But they had the opposite effect. Rage filled Lyra's chest, not hot and explosive, but cold and focused, like ice forming over deep water. She lunged. Garrick met her head-on with the confidence of a veteran who'd fought this battle 100 times before. Their bodies collided with bone-jarring force, the impact echoing through the hall. They rolled across the floor, a tangle of white and brown fur, snapping jaws and slashing claws. Garrick was stronger, more experienced, more tactical. He got his jaws around her throat and bit down, his teeth digging into her fur, cutting off her air. Pain exploded through Lyra's neck, and panic threatened to overwhelm her as her vision started to darken. Then she remembered Matthias's training, his voice echoing in her memory. You control the cold. Don't just fight with teeth and claws like a common wolf. Use what makes you frostborn. Lyra concentrated through the pain and fear, pulling on the power that lived in her bones like drawing water from a well. Frost erupted from her fur where Garrick's mouth was clamped down, spreading across his muzzle into his mouth, coating his teeth and tongue and throat in ice. The sudden, intense cold made him yelp in shock and pain. He released her, stumbling backward, shaking his head violently to try to dislodge the ice forming in his mouth. Lyra twisted away, gasping for air, blood dripping from her neck where his teeth had punctured skin. The wounds hurt, but they weren't fatal. She was alive. She could fight. Garrick shook his head one final time, chunks of ice flying from his jaws. Cheap tricks won't save you, freak. Lyra hit him again before he could finish the sentence, this time coming from the side where his blind spot was. Her claws raked across his ribs, and where they touched, frost followed immediately, freezing the wounds and making them impossible to heal quickly with normal wolf regeneration. Garrick roared in pain and fury, the sound shaking dust from the rafters. He was bigger and stronger, but Lyra was faster and more mobile. She danced around him, striking and retreating, each hit leaving frozen damage he couldn't repair. Frost spread across his brown fur like a disease, marking every place she'd touched him. The tide was turning, and everyone in the hall could see it. Garrick realized it too. His strategy wasn't working. His experience meant nothing against an opponent who fought with powers he'd never encountered before. So he changed tactics, abandoning finesse for raw power. He charged at her like a battering ram, trying to use his superior weight to crush her against the stone floor. Lyra dodged left, but not quite fast enough. Garrick's shoulder caught her hindquarters, sending her spinning across the floor. She hit the ground hard, her breath knocked out, stars exploding across her vision. Garrick was on her in an instant, his massive weight pinning her down, his jaws aiming for her spine, the killing blow that would end the fight permanently. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Lyra could see his teeth descending toward her back, could feel the heat of his breath, could smell his rage and desperation. She had maybe 1 second, one chance to survive this. She rolled onto her back with every ounce of strength she had, getting her front paws up just as Garrick's weight came down. Her paws slammed into his chest, directly over his heart. At the exact same moment, she released every ounce of cold power she'd been building, holding nothing back. Ice exploded outward from the point of contact like a bomb detonating. Garrick's entire chest froze solid in an instant. The ice spread outward in crystalline branches, racing across his fur, into his skin, through his muscles. He stumbled backward, his eyes wide with shock and pain, frost spreading across his body like a living thing consuming him from the inside out. He tried to breathe, but his lungs were frozen. Tried to move, but his muscles wouldn't respond, locked in place by ice that had formed between the fibers. He took one step backward, then another, then collapsed onto the stone floor with a sound like breaking branches. His body was locked in ice from chest to hindquarters, steam rising from the frozen mass where his body heat fought against the supernatural cold Lyra had unleashed. The hall erupted in absolute chaos. Lyra pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly from exhaustion and pain. Her neck was bleeding, her ribs ached from the impact, but she was standing. Garrick wasn't. Wolves were shouting, some in celebration, others in fear, many simply in shock at what they'd just witnessed. A 3-week-old wolf had just defeated a veteran alpha using powers that hadn't been seen in the North for 70 years. Morgana stepped forward, her expression carefully controlled but her eyes showing grudging respect. She examined Garrick's frozen form, checking for signs of life. His chest still moved slightly, barely, but he was breathing. "Garrick Ironpine is unable to continue," Morgana declared, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "The challenge goes to Lyra Hale by technical knockout." Lyra shifted back to human form, her chest heaving, her whole body trembling from exhaustion and adrenaline crash. Around the hall, wolves were staring at her with a mixture of awe, fear, and respect. She'd just done the impossible. Matthias was grinning like a wolf who'd caught the fattest rabbit in the forest, pride radiating from every line of his body. Darian looked like he wanted to rush forward and check her injuries, but he held his position, maintaining the formal distance required during official challenges. And Morgana looked thoughtful, like she was recalculating everything she thought she knew. "By the ancient laws of challenge," Morgana said, her voice carrying through the now silent hall, "the Council is bound to honor the terms set before combat began. The Frostborn bloodline is hereby recognized as an official pack of the Northern Territories, with all rights, privileges, and protections therein." A shockwave of reaction rolled through the assembled wolves, but Morgana raised her hand for silence. "However," she continued, her eyes fixed on Lyra, "recognition comes with significant responsibilities. You will need to establish a defined territory, build a functional pack structure with clear hierarchy, prove you can govern effectively and peacefully. Can you meet these requirements?" Lyra looked at Garrick's frozen form, still locked in ice on the floor. Then she looked at the council, at the hundreds of wolves watching her, at the banners hanging from the rafters representing centuries of pack history. "Yes," she said firmly, "but I'm not just building a Frostborn pack for wolves with ancient bloodlines. I'm building a pack for any wolf who doesn't fit the traditional mold. The suppressed, the exiled, the ones deemed too weak or too different or too dangerous. Every wolf who's been told they don't deserve to exist." She straightened despite her injuries, ignoring the pain in her neck. "And I'm establishing that pack in former Ironpine territory." Gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. "Ironpine is Garrick's territory," one of the alphas objected, half rising from his seat. "You can't just—" "Garrick tried to murder me," Lyra said flatly, her voice carrying steel. "He poisoned me systematically for years to suppress my natural abilities and prevent me from becoming a threat to his power. That's grounds for territory seizure under Northern Law, Article 47, subsection C. Or do the rules only apply when they're convenient for the Council?" Morgana's lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. "You know the law better than I expected for someone so young." "I had 3 weeks to study it," Lyra said, glancing at Darian, "and a very thorough, very patient teacher who made sure I understood every loophole and precedent." Darian inclined his head slightly, pride evident in his expression. "Very well," Morgana said after a moment of consideration. "Alpha Garrick's crimes of systematic poisoning and attempted murder are documented and witnessed. Under Article 47, his territory is forfeit. The former Ironpine lands are hereby transferred to the newly recognized Frostborn pack under the leadership of Alpha Lyra Hale." The hall exploded again with reactions, but Lyra barely heard them. She'd done it. Against every impossible odd, every expectation, every fear, she'd won. She'd gone from exiled victim to recognized alpha in 3 weeks. The ice around Garrick began to crack and melt as Lyra's power faded with her exhaustion. He shifted back to human form slowly, his skin blue with cold, his breathing ragged and labored. He looked up at Lyra with pure, undiluted hatred burning in his eyes. "This isn't over," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "I'll find a way to—" "You'll do nothing," Morgana said coldly, cutting him off. "You're stripped of your title, your territory, and your seat on this council. Be grateful we're letting you keep your worthless life after what you've done." 2 guards stepped forward and hauled Garrick to his feet, his legs barely supporting his weight. They dragged him from the hall, and he didn't struggle. He just stared at Lyra the entire way, promises of vengeance burning in his eyes, even as his body failed him. But Lyra didn't care. He couldn't hurt her anymore. She'd won. 3 days later, Lyra stood at the edge of what used to be Iron Pine territory, looking down at the valley she'd grown up in. The pack house sat in the center, smaller than she remembered from childhood, but still solid and functional. Smoke rose from its chimneys, and she could see wolves moving between buildings, going about their daily routines. Her wolves now. Her responsibility. Her pack. Darian stood beside her, his presence steady and grounding as always. "Having second thoughts about taking on this much responsibility so quickly?" "About 100, Lyra admitted honestly. "I barely know how to be a wolf, let alone an alpha responsible for dozens of lives. What if I fail them? What if I'm not strong enough or smart enough or—" "You'll learn," Darian interrupted gently. "Leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to try, to adapt, to put your pack's needs above your own comfort, and you won't be doing it alone." He gestured to the valley. "I've assigned 3 of my most experienced advisors to help you establish governance structures. Sarah's already down there setting up a proper medical wing, and Kieran volunteered to train your guard and security forces." Lyra looked at him, gratitude welling up in her chest. "Why are you helping me so much? You've already done more than anyone could reasonably expect." Darian was quiet for a moment, his golden eyes distant. "Because you remind me why I became Alpha in the first place. Not for power or territory or political influence, but to protect wolves who can't protect themselves. To build something better than what came before." He met her gaze. "You're doing something important here, Lyra. Building a pack based on acceptance instead of fear, on potential instead of tradition. Don't lose sight of that vision when things get difficult." "I won't," Lyra promised. They descended into the valley together, their boots crunching through late autumn leaves. As they approached the pack house, wolves began emerging, some curious, some wary, all watching their new alpha with uncertainty and assessment. Lyra recognized many of them. Kira, the young wolf who'd been injured protecting her months ago, stood near the front, her expression uncertain but hopeful. Marcus was there too, his shoulders still bandaged from where Kieran had bitten him during the mountain confrontation, his face showing resignation rather than hostility. Lyra stopped in front of the assembled wolves and shifted to her white wolf form, letting them see exactly what she was. No more hiding, no more pretending to be something she wasn't. "I know most of you," she said, her voice carrying across the gathering. "Some of you hunted me when Garrick ordered my execution. Some of you watched silently while he exiled me to die in the winter storm. And some of you were just following orders because that's what wolves do in a pack structure built on fear and absolute obedience." She paused, meeting as many eyes as she could. "I'm not interested in revenge for what happened. What's done is done, and dwelling on past wrongs won't build the future we need. But things are going to change here fundamentally. No more poisoning wolves to suppress their abilities. No more exiling pack members for being different. No more loyalty maintained through fear and violence." "What do we get instead?" Marcus asked, his voice challenging but not hostile. "Pretty words about acceptance don't put food on the table or defend borders." "A choice," Lyra said simply. "The freedom to stay and help me build something better than what we had before. Or the freedom to leave and find another pack that fits your values better. But if you stay, you follow my rules. Strength through unity and cooperation, not domination. Protection for all pack members, not just the physically powerful ones. Value measured by contribution, not compatibility." She shifted back to human form, standing before them in simple clothing, her white hair bright in the afternoon sun. I'm not like Garrick. I won't be the kind of alpha who rules through fear and violence and intimidation. But I will be the kind of alpha who protects her pack with everything she has, who fights for every wolf under her protection, who builds something worth belonging to. Silence fell over the gathering, wolves exchanging uncertain glances. Then Kira stepped forward decisively. She dropped to one knee, her head bowed in the traditional gesture of submission and loyalty. I accept you as my alpha. I pledge my loyalty to the Frostborn pack. One by one, other wolves followed her example. Not all of them. Marcus and a handful of others turned and walked away, refusing to submit to the wolf who'd defeated their former alpha. Lyra let them go without comment or punishment. She'd meant what she said about choice being fundamental to her pack structure. By the time the sun began to set, over half the former Iron Pine wolves had knelt before her and pledged their loyalty. It was a start, a foundation to build on. Matthias appeared from inside the pack house, looking amused by the whole proceeding. Not bad for your first day as alpha, though you're going to need significantly more wolves if you want to actually defend this territory when other packs start testing your borders. Already working on it, Lyra said confidently. Darian's sending word to scattered Frostborn descendants throughout the territories. If there are others out there who've been hiding, suppressed, afraid to reveal what they are, I want them to know they have a home here, a place where being Frostborn isn't a death sentence. And if none come? Matthias challenged. Then we build with what we have, Lyra said firmly. One wolf at a time, one day at a time. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither will the new Frostborn pack be. Over the following weeks, Lyra's prediction proved accurate beyond her expectations. Wolves began arriving at the valley, some with traces of Frostborn bloodline showing in pale eyes or unusual cold tolerance, others simply looking for a pack that would accept them despite their differences from traditional pack norms. A wolf who could only partially shift, stuck between forms. Another who had powerful healing abilities but almost no combat strength. A third who'd been exiled for being too small to meet his birth pack's physical requirements. A female wolf whose prophetic dreams had gotten her labeled as cursed and dangerous. Lyra welcomed them all without judgment or conditions. She established new rules, new traditions, new ways of measuring worth and contribution. Strength was measured not by dominance in combat, but by positive contribution to pack welfare. Every wolf had inherent value, regardless of their combat abilities or physical power. And anyone caught poisoning, suppressing, or deliberately harming another pack member would be exiled immediately and permanently. The other packs watched warily from their borders, some with open suspicion and hostility, others with cautious curiosity about this unprecedented social experiment. But none challenged her claim to the territory or questioned her right to rule. She'd won that through combat in front of the entire Northern Council. 3 months after taking control of the territory, Lyra stood in the great hall of the rebuilt and renovated pack house, addressing her assembled wolves. The space had been transformed from the dark, oppressive chamber Garrick had ruled from into something warmer and more welcoming. Darian was there as a guest, along with Kieran and Sarah. Matthias stood near the back, looking proud of what they'd built together. We've accomplished a lot in a short time, Lyra said, her voice carrying through the hall. But we have much further to go before we're truly secure. The North is watching us closely, waiting to see if we'll fail, waiting for an excuse to say the Frostborn can't be trusted with power and autonomy. She paused, meeting the eyes of her pack members. So we're going to prove them wrong through our actions. We're going to build the strongest, most united, most innovative pack in the Northern Territories. Not through fear or violence or intimidation, but through loyalty and trust and mutual support. And if they come for us anyway? One wolf asked from the crowd. If they decide we're too successful and need to be eliminated? Lyra's eyes flashed blue, cold power radiating from her in a visible wave. Then they'll learn why the Frostborn were feared in the first place. Not because we're inherently violent or power-hungry, but because we protect our own with everything we have. Always. Without exception. Without mercy for those who threaten our pack. The hall erupted in howls of approval and support, the sound shaking the rafters and echoing across the valley. That night, Lyra stood on the balcony of her private chambers, looking out over the valley that was now truly her home. Fires burned in the village below, warm light spilling from windows as families settled in for the evening. Her wolves, her pack, finding peace and safety in the territory she'd claimed. Darian joined her, carrying 2 cups of hot cider. He handed her one, and they stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge overhead. "Do you ever regret it?" Darian asked quietly after several minutes. "Walking into that council meeting? Challenging Garrick? Taking on this massive responsibility?" Lyra thought about it seriously, considering the question. She thought about the girl she'd been 3 months ago, cold, exiled, convinced she was worthless and broken beyond repair. Then she thought about who she'd become. Alpha, leader, Frostborn, protector. "No," she said finally, conviction ringing in her voice. "I regret that it took so long, that I spent so many years believing I was broken and worthless when I was just being deliberately suppressed by someone who feared my potential." Darian nodded slowly. "Your father would be incredibly proud of you, of everything you've built here." Lyra's throat tightened with emotion. "I hope so. I like to think he's watching somehow, seeing that his daughter didn't let them break her." They stood in silence for a while longer, watching the stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns. The winter wind blew cold across the mountains, but Lyra barely felt it anymore. The cold was part of her now, woven into her very essence. Not something to fear or fight against, but something to embrace as fundamental to who and what she was. She was Frostborn. She was Alpha. She was exactly where she was meant to be. Down in the valley, a wolf howled, the sound picked up and echoed by others throughout the territory, a chorus rising into the night sky. Not a war cry or a threat or a challenge, but a celebration, a declaration of existence and pride. The Frostborn had returned to the northern territories after 70 years of enforced extinction, and the North would never be the same again. Lyra smiled, feeling the weight of her white fur cloak around her shoulders, the symbol of everything she'd fought for and won. She'd been cast into the frozen frontier to die, abandoned by those who should have protected her. But she'd survived. She'd transformed. She'd risen. And now, standing in her own territory with her own pack howling her name into the winter night, Lyra Hale, Alpha of the Frostborn, Queen of the Reclaimed North, knew without doubt that she was finally, truly home.